Specifically, what we're asking for today is to have permission to start the investigation on 10 specific properties. These are the sites we talk at. The one that many of you have probably received many email on are the 3 sites at the bottom. These are vacant lots right now. There was a lot of discussion and a lot of interest in preserving these schools these properties as school properties. It's important to note that 70 years ago, we built schools in support of the demand. And for about 30 plus years, we operated schools. And in the last 35 years, we have not operated schools on this property. We would not be continuing a school use on these property. We would be taking advantage of property that has served no use to the district, but has been a financial burden for the last 35 years. We recognize these are single family housing. There's no one from facilities that's going to come forward to the board and suggest that we build multifamily housing in a single family house. It's inappropriate. We are asking the board for authority to look at potential land swaps. Our target areas are not these 3 schools for our workforce housing. Our target areas are others, and there might be that someone has property that is more beneficial for us to achieve our goals, and we could swap that out. That would leave it to that developer to only build or develop that property for what is appropriate for that property as defined by what they're able to get permitted for.
So you talked about sometimes we can swap with a builder. And how can we be sure that that builder is going to keep his word when he says, I'm going to use that property for this, and then he changes his mind? How can we be assured?
Obviously, that's a challenge. We can have them propose things. We can write contracts that would talk about what that use is, but we're going to depend heavily on the city. The city is the one who issues the permits that would authorize them. Right now, those sites are permitted for construction of a school. They would have to change that permit to do anything other than to build a school. So we can have agreements. I don't know that we would want to be in the business of going back and enforcing that and doing the job of the city. But there certainly are laws in place that talk about zoning and what's appropriate and what is not appropriate. LAUSD should not be the enforcers of those laws, but we can certainly make sure that they have made commitments for what they're doing, that they've engaged the community, and the community understands what's being proposed, and then the community would have recourse if someone tried to not follow through on what their commitments were.
Okay, so I'm finished, but let me just summarize. I'm most concerned about transparency, and I'm concerned about that 7-Eleven committee. I heard what you had to say, but I am not sure that we do enough transparency with our parents and with our employees and with our kids as we should be doing, number one. And number two, I can't trust a builder to keep his word when we swap properties with him. I understand what you're saying, I really do, but I feel that we are committed to our neighborhoods and our citizens in our neighborhoods. And if we say that this is what's going to happen, and then they turn around and do something completely opposite and say, go sue me, I mean, that's not what we should be doing as a school district. That's just my opinion. And I appreciate what you told us. Thank you, Mark.
Very much. Mr. Melvoin?
What I know that like one concern that constituents have raised around, oh, we need more schools for the Warner Center project. And I know that you've engaged with them, but as part of this community engagement, we'll also talk about the educational needs of the area. And I'm curious how the facilities conversation dovetails with kind of the enrollment and demographic projections, so that we're not, giving up land where in a decade we're actually going to need it for schools.
We certainly recognize, having lived through the eminent domain process, that it's very hard to get property if you don't have it for future needs. And we don't want to get rid of anything that we may potentially need. But for those particular schools, for 35 years, we have not needed a school there. Yes, there is extensive development happening in the area of those schools. We have a demographics team that is very good with a remarkable success record, literally, decimals of a percentage of coming in our projections for a specific area. Maybe not exactly school, but for a general area, we're very good. And we believe that we have enough seats, empty seats right now in those areas, plus the available space on existing campuses. We don't need to build a new campus as our overall enrollment is declining with new administrators, new overhead. when we have an existing campus that has room to build additional facilities that could house anything beyond the empty seats that we have now. We believe that we do not have a need to build schools on those 3 sites that we've proposed anytime in the near future. And that if we do need to build new space, that we have existing space that will accommodate it much more efficiently and better serve the students.
Ms. Gonez.
I want to be really clear that I'm very supportive of our efforts to provide housing on our LA Unified properties because they fill such a critical need in our communities. I authored a board resolution back in November of 2019 to look at ways we could use our property for how, I think it was November of 2018 actually, 2018, to look at how we could use our property for housing our families that face housing instability. And back when that resolution passed, I said publicly that community engagement would be a critical starting place before we proceeded with any particular sites. Though those comments were specifically focused on our students and families, my preferred approach remains the same. And I don't agree in any way with underlying opposition to housing that's rooted in NIMBYism or other reasons. LA has the critical shortage of housing, and LA Unified should absolutely be part of that solution.
Ms. Goldberg.
Those issues have to be addressed, and not just at the school I happen to represent, but in all of the places that are schools. I feel less about that, about closed schools. There's nobody there. There's no reason to not move on. But how you move on even those because they're in communities is also important. So I just feel strongly that we got a little bit ahead of ourselves.
Thank you very much. Mr. Melvoin, see your hand.
Thanks, Dr. Bladvick. And, I appreciate this conversation. I think these are all important points and questions. I just want to speak a little bit to the properties, at least in my board district, because I know the board has been hearing advocacy. And I think a lot of it's valid, especially because these 3 properties, the 2 in board district 4 and the 1 I believe in board district 3 were only added to this list a few days ago. So, I understand the feelings of the community that where is this coming from? But I do just need to acknowledge, on behalf of Mark's team too, but also our board office and Mr. Schmerelson, because we've actually done some of these meetings together, that there's been a lot of engagement. Since I joined the board, we've talked about these, at least the 2 Oso and Collins shuttered properties and the need to better utilize them for the district, whether that's for housing or for educational purposes or as a community park. But the idea that we're sitting on valuable land paying taxes has made no sense to me. And so we have met with the Woodland Hills Homeowners Association, and we've met with the neighborhood councils and individual constituents on multiple occasions. And the commitment that I've given them and that remains is that we wouldn't be moving forward on anything until we got their input. And to me, this seems to be kind of that chicken and the egg piece that I was talking about before, that we could do a better job. But I know, Mark, we've met with a lot of these neighbors many times, and we'll continue to do so. And I think that one of the challenges, just very transparently, is that there's areas, it seems like, where we need to do more engagement, and there's areas where our engagement is going to result in answers that people don't like. And I acknowledge that, and as the elected representative of these folks, I think it's my responsibility to make sure I'm listening and communicating their concerns. But to the points that have already been raised, I think, as stewards of the taxpayer property, that we need to do, at least with Oso and Collins, better than we have for 35 years. And whether that is building a school as the community wants or not, as the district has said we have no need for, we've met with these folks a lot and we'll continue to do so. So I just want to make that point, because although we need more explicit community engagement, and I'll acknowledge that this shouldn't have been maybe thrown on these 3 properties added at the last minute, there's been a lot of work and talk, and this shouldn't come as a surprise that these conversations are coming to the board, because we've been preheating them, if you will, for 3 years. The question I just have with that, maybe for Mark or for the superintendent, is just what are the consequences of delay?
Consequences, of course, would mean we would slow the process down, potentially losing opportunities for the legislation. Right now, they've given us a window that seems like a large window, but in the course of these actions, it might not seem as large. As we get more and more community engagement, that doesn't speed the process up, that slows it down. So we wanted to start as soon as we could.
I mean, is there a world where there's, I plan to support this, but I'm just curious, is there a world where there's community engagement that could happen in those 2 months, in that 2-month window?
Let me reframe this slightly, Mr. Melvoin, because you asked a very good question. The holidays are upon us. I don't think authentic communication is going to happen in the month of November or the month of December. All that's being asked today is for the process to continue and set up a path of engagement, as Mr. Hovatter said, starting next week and continuing through November and December and January and February, to the point at which we know more about what the art of the possible is economically. We know what might be possible in terms of constructive action, and we know better what the community has to say, but you need all those pieces. So a delay, we'll have the same conversation in January we'll have now. I don't know that we'll be at a point where the Oso community or any of the other particular communities have had a chance to give us their full views, nor will we have had enough facts to share with those communities and to come back to this board to say this is all based on a set of facts, not based on a set of opinions. So the intent was never to authorize an action other than moving forward. And as difficult as this conversation is, to be realistic, it will get more difficult. One of the things that happens with property is people get used to it being where it is, how it is. As you said, there's been a vacant lot for 35 years and it is where it is. And there might be a few people who live next door to the fence, but if you live a block away, it means there's no other home and there's no other person on your street. Affordable housing is a tough road to hoe. So if we're not prepared to take the action today, it's fine. But I wouldn't have an expectation that in January, what Mark and the team are able to present is going to be appreciably different. What they might be able to present in March or May, or a year from March or May, could be appreciably different. But first, the board has to decide that it's something it wishes to act on and allow Mark and the team to gather enough facts to come back and have an informed conversation as opposed to just speculation.
We have a caller number 1. If you hit *6, we'll be able to hear you. You received a message that you were unmuted.
Hi, my name is Shelley Schwartz, and I'm speaking in opposition to the Employee Housing Initiative. I am speaking as a board member of the Woodland Hills Homeowners Organization, the WHO, and as head of their education committee. And I am also a resident of the neighborhood surrounding the Oso School property in Woodland Hills. First, I'd like to say how disappointed and shocked we are that this proposal was put on the agenda with zero transparency and no advance notice or input to the affected communities or West Valley community organizations. Facilities only reached out with an email after the board started receiving opposition emails from the affected communities. On behalf of the homeowners, the property owners, and families surrounding the neighborhoods of the Oso School and Collins School in Woodland Hills, the WHO adamantly opposes the housing initiative as currently presented. The WHO, in the interest of our members, cannot support this proposal unless it is amended to enable proper planning and protection of appropriate school properties for educational use. We understand the need for affordable housing, but the use of school properties located in the middle of single-family neighborhoods and paid for by taxpayers is not the answer. Some sites in Woodland Hills may be appropriate, while others are wholly inappropriate. The Oso School site is an unacceptable option and should be removed from this proposal. Oso is located within 1 mile of Warner Center, an area which will have 20,000 new residential units by 2035 and estimated to result in 3,000 to 4,000 new LAUSD students. The current schools cannot accommodate this growth, and the Oso site will be needed. The Oso site is located in a hilly, single-family neighborhood with limited street parking and no access to mass transit, shopping, parks, or retail. The topography and uniqueness of a neighborhood must be considered when choosing sites. In 2019, the WHO, along with the Save Our School Sites Committee, submitted to the board a petition with 1,200 signatures requesting the school sites be preserved for educational use. There were also many meetings with Mr. Melvoin, Mr. Schmerelson, Councilman Blumenthal, and we were assured of their support. The WHO requests that the Oso and Collins schools be removed from this proposal and be preserved for future educational needs of the growing area. We also request that any future sites considered for housing be appropriate for use. Any school property that is located in a single-family zone that is not immediately adjacent to or abutting a major street or mass transit shall not be used for that purpose. The premise also that properties such as Oso can be exchanged with a promise from a developer to build appropriate housing is meaningless when current zoning laws are almost non-existent, density bonus exists, and CEQA reviews are non-existent. LAUSD must select properties that are far more appropriate for development and protect the Oso and Collins School property for educational use only. This will restore the lack of trust and confidence that this proposal has created. The WHO and all of the Woodland Hills community members will be watching this closely and will continue to advocate for Woodland Hills. Thank you.